Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our town hall today for the accounts receivable SCO enhancements for remittances and remittance corrections. We are now live as of Monday of last week. And so this is now your opportunity to get a few updates from us. We want to make sure that you have received some communications that we sent out about the functionality. We also have a demo for you today after a quick review. Also be your opportunity to ask questions. Start with a communication that we sent out to all department liaisons. If you haven't received this or seen this, please reach out to your department liaison. They should be able to forward the communication. We do have a job aid, discount 391. It was updated. Discount 391A for remittances, discount 391B for remittance correction. Testing. Okay. Thanks, James. So we just had it sounds like there was some issues with the audio, so hopefully we've got that corrected now. Hey, James, did they hear the first part or should I start from the beginning? Okay. Just to make sure everyone heard, I'll go ahead and restart. So welcome to our town hall. I just wanted to share a communication with you all that went out to all the department liaisons. And if you haven't received this communication, if you are in the AR department in your or AR office in your department, please talk to your department liaison so they can forward it to you. In review, just so everybody has the information, we have a new job aid called SCO 391. The job aid SCO 391 was updated and split into two parts. SCO 391A for remittances and SCO 391B for remittance corrections. The reason for that is because they were just too long and we wanted to make sure you knew which one to go to, depending on if you had a correction or were just doing a remittance. These job aids have the updated SCO approval guideline matrix, so please review those. You can print them out and use them if you're doing remittances or remittance corrections. So we'd like to note that all departments are required to use a request type and for each payment sequence. So as you're going through payment sequence 1, 2, 3, etc., each of those will need a request type identified. Also, the submit for approval button is required for all payment sequences, including NOB, catch-up, state fund, and CTS fund transactions. It's not necessarily a submit for approval because just because you click it doesn't mean it's going for approval. It just means that that is the trigger that will validate whether it needs to go for approval, whether it's just going to process and post in Fiscal, and then you can refer to the guidance matrix that is outlined in SCO 391A. Just for everyone's awareness, the deposit pre-approval process runs 4 times per day. It runs at 5 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 p.m., and 3 p.m. So if you do click the submit for approval button and you have a pre-approved transaction, it'll be scheduled to run during each of those time windows, and it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. So if the sequence is in budget error and doesn't complete budget check, you have to correct that using the modified accounting entries page. So that you'll be able to go in there and see what's wrong and then make sure you can fix it. And if the item has no exceptions and completes budget check, it'll go through journal generation at 3:30 p.m. I wanted to give everyone an update as well. The content in this email, we are going to be updating the job aid SCO 391A to include this content as a long-term storage. And then, of course, any transactions that require SCO approval will work both to SCO for approval, as outlined in the guidance matrix. And then there's some budget check processing criteria. You'll need to make sure that deposits are tied to a deposit slip. When you have multiple payment sequences, they should all be ready so that the budget check can run as soon as and they will run as soon as they are pre-approved or approved by SCO. Additionally, $0 deposits with multiple payment sequences must wait for all payment sequences to be pre-approved or approved by SCO in order for the entire deposit to be available for budget check. So if you think there might be a concern with part of them, you might want to split those up, but you should follow your department business process. And then only the transactions that have an exception or require SCO start approval may be manually budget checked after SCO start approval. If the transactions are not manually budget checked, it will budget check systematically at the next scheduled time. And then, of course, if you are in INF AR 18 department, if you've been impacted from this enhancement, we just wanted to make it clear that departments have not received any exemptions unless you know that you have received an exemption. And typically, exemptions are given because departments already have another source or way to give data to SCO to confirm the transactions. So if you have a request, you'll need to email SCO, and then you can email Colleen Morrow. You can email one of these target areas, especially SCO Fiscal Production Support. That would be scofsprod@sco.ca.gov. And then you can always CC Colleen Morrow, cmorrow@sco.ca.gov. So like I said before, this information will be available in the job aid. You should get an update when you see that. It might happen this week or next week, but you all know that it's available at that time. In the meantime, please go talk to your department liaison and have them forward you the email for your reference for now. I know that was a lot of information. You might already have questions. Okay, so I'm hearing that we're getting a lot of questions, but we wanted to make sure that we had time for the demo and the short period of time that we have today. So first, this functionality came and you all first saw it with business process documentation sessions when we invited a few of you in from your department to review the changes. Hopefully you've had some conversations with your supervisors if you are department staff. And then we went live last Monday. So at a high level, SCO approval is going to be required for AR direct journal payments, as well as some AR customer item payments. And then you can refer to the job aid for the specifics of what's being approved or not being approved. We've got some new functions on the page. So those are going to be for remittances. For this page, you'll see it's the request type and the SCO deposit type, as well as documenting the document information in the document information fields. And then for remittance corrections, you won't need to do the request type there. You have to do this manually because there won't be a way. The deposit slips for remittances will automatically link from the deposit slip. However, since the corrections we won't know what that is, you'll have to enter those manually in the legacy description field. That legacy description field will be the ID that you can use and will show up on your SCO agency reconciliation reports. All right, so now we're going to have our SCO SME, Mi Hong. She's going to do a demonstration.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Corey. So for our demonstration today, we will be sharing two examples. So for this first transaction, I will be showing you a TC47 remittance that is tied to a deposit slip. So as you can see here, the bank account is a CTS bank account. And here is the link to the bank deposit number. So with this enhancement, you will see a new field called the SCO deposit type. And for this transaction, it is pre-populated as a remittance. So now you're required to select a request type. So for this, we will be remitting to the state fund general revenue account. So after that, you will see the document information populated. And since this is tied to a deposit slip, this information is pre-populated for you. So we have an additional validation that since we selected the request type general revenue, the account information that we should enter should only be for a revenue account. So in this example, if I entered in an expense account, I will get an error message once I click on the create accounting entries. So it's saying that this account is not a valid account for this request type. So if I go back and correct the account, then it should be correct. So then you will be prompted to certify and submit for approval. And as you can see here, the legal authority and reason for request is pre-populated for this request type. So now we can certify the transaction. So after certifying the transaction, you will be required to click on submit for approval. So with this enhancement, you will be required to click on submit for approval for all transactions. So you can refer to the matrix in Job Aid 391A to see if a particular transaction will workflow to SCO for review. So for our second demonstration, I would like to show you a $0 deposit for a NOB catch-up transaction. So as you can see here, the bank account is a CTS bank account, and there isn't a hyperlink to the bank deposit number because this is a $0 deposit. And if you note here, the location code is NOB. So for this transaction, we will be selecting the request type as NOB catch-up transaction. And for NOB catch-up transactions, there are no required document information, but this field is open to you to provide any additional information. So once again, you'll be prompted to certify and submit for approval. But if we click on the certify button, you will be prompted that you have to make sure all the payment sequences within the deposit are completed. So next we'll go to payment sequence 2 to complete the deposit. So once again, I would select the request type as NOB catch-up transaction. So now that all the payment sequences have been completed, we can certify the deposit. So once we click on the certification, it should apply for all payment sequences. And then there has been a lot of hesitation from the department on clicking on submit for approval. Even though this is a NOB catch-up transaction, we have to click on submit for approval for all transactions. But this will not route to SCO for review and will not interface to the legacy system. So that concludes the demonstration, and now we are open for questions.
Hi, this is Brianna Lee from CMO. The first question is, why can you key account 5432000 to abatement request type, but not 5432500? We have many of both, and it is inefficient to use other remittances request type and have to manually key the same legal authority as pre-populates under abatement request type.
So those were the guidelines that were set by SCO SARD, and they had developed the matrix and the request type abatement. The account that is on the matrix, those are the allowed accounts for that specific request type. So any account that isn't covered under a specific request type will have to go, you would have to use request type remittances other.
Thank you. The next question is, are all $0 deposits considered NOB transactions? I thought a lot of them needed to route to SCO for approval.
No, not all NOB transactions, not all $0 deposits are NOB transactions. Only catch-up transactions should be for NOB transactions. And regardless of the transactions, you would have to click on submit for approval, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will route to SCO for review.
Thank you. The next question is about ZDD correction for using CTS bank account. The message pops up as for remittance transaction, at least one payment must have distribution line with CTS fund code. Please advise.
So when you are entering a $0 deposit and on your deposit control, you selected a CTS bank account, within your $0 deposit, one of your payment sequences under the chart field should be a CTS fund.
Next question is, do we still have to identify this as NOB on the location part?
Yes, if you're doing a correction within Fiscal.
The next question is, we rely heavily on the notes field when keying in deposits. We notice that field is now replaced by notes to approver, which does not show up on the cash receipt detail. Is there another field where we can record info?
We will look into that and get back to you.
Okay, the next question is, this person is trying to submit a $0 NOB correction, and I'm getting this error message for remittance transaction. At least one payment must have distribution line with CTS fund code.
I think this is similar to the question earlier that if you're entering a $0 deposit and your bank account on the deposit control page is a CTS, then one of your payment sequences have to be a CTS fund.
Okay. Next question. Should we certify sequence 1 or 2 on ZDDs, or it doesn't matter?
For $0 deposits, you can wait to certify on the last payment sequence. And once you certify on the last payment sequence, this applies to all payment sequences in the deposit.
This person is asking, can you provide a demonstration on creating a $0 deposit for correcting over remittance?
To do a live demonstration. We will work on that and get back to you on that one.
The next question is, if the legal authority and reason for request auto-populates, do we still need to add more information to the legal authority, or can we leave it with the auto-populated information?
You can leave it with the pre-populated legal authority, but you can also provide additional information to SCO for review if necessary.
Okay, the next question that we have is, has the issue been fixed when payments are applied to reimbursements in the billing module? It interfaces to GL account 1319 or sometimes GL 1312. It then goes into suspense at legacy.
Yes, that issue has been fixed.
Okay, this is referring to matrix 22. Is it applied for over remittance? If yes, we do negative cash to state fund and positive cash to CTS fund. What account should be used for CTS fund?
Please refer to the job aid for the matrix in the job aid for the correct account to use for each request type.
Next question is, if we are processing trust funds, which request type do I select?
If this is for related to your CTS fund, then you should be using request type same CTS fund transactions.
The next question is, we have positive deposits with negative entries for refund of credit cards. Should we separate the refund on another payment sequence? Will SCO approve this?
Yes, you would be using request type for negative remittances.
Next question is, how do we handle older money in our CTS account that we need to remit that is not related to a deposit slip not recorded in Fiscal?
Can you repeat that?
Okay, I'm repeating the question. How do we handle older money in our CTS account that we need to remit that is not related to a deposit slip not recorded in Fiscal?
I believe you would have to do a NOB catch-up transaction for these transactions.
Thank you, everybody. We have a lot more questions, So I wanted to let everybody know that we will be answering questions. We have this town hall is only scheduled for a half hour. And so our SMEs will be able to stay around and answer questions until about 15 minutes after the hour. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up for that. So me will be up in just 1 second to continue answering questions. So I just wanted to quickly review how to access the job aid. So if you go to the Access Fiscal page and then you click Service Now, it will allow you to get into the job aid itself. If you find that you are viewing something like this where it says an updated version of this article is available for any reason, please click that so that you are viewing the latest one. And then sometimes you'll see this on the right, depending on which screen you're seeing. But when you search for Fiscal 391, you'll see both Fiscal 391A for remittances and Fiscal 391B for remittance corrections. And then if you open it up for A, the job aid starts with policy guidance and some different advice for different scenarios. We're getting a lot of questions. I think if you go and review this, you'll get some insight too. And then down here, these are actual examples for how to do the different transactions, and then maybe a highlights of new requirements down here. And then for B, it's very similar, where the first part of it is SCO policy guidelines and some additional information for corrections, and then some selected common examples for different request types depending on the correction. So that's how you can review the job aids. And then we're going to get back to and then if we're not able to answer your question in today's session, please contact the Fiscal Service Center at fiscal.ca.gov. And now I'm going to hand the mic back to me, who will be available for another 15 minutes for questions until 2:15. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We've been also getting a lot of questions about AR18. So me is going to take some time to talk about that right now.
So for INFAR 18 departments, you can use the mass completion page, and on the mass completion page, it has been updated for you to add the request type and the related documents.
When we need to make a correction to move funds from a CTS account into a state fund, would this be an NOB or not?
No, that would not be a NOB transaction if you are remitting it to the state fund.
Okay, the next question is, I'm doing an NOB transaction to reclassify a FTF drawdown. When I go to submit it for approval, I get an error message that says legal authority and reason for request is a mandatory field. However, verbiage is in the field. How do I bypass this?
This might be an issue with if your transaction was created prior to the enhancement, and we are working on fixing this issue.
Thank you. Next question is, can AR processors use the mass completion page? I do not see it, or is it only for AR approvers?
It is for AR approvers.
The next question is the mass completion function available for all direct journal entries for all agencies?
Yes, it is available for all departments.
How do we apply a payment for an invoice? Will there still be a worksheet as before?
Yes, you can still use the worksheet like before.
When is INFAR 18 going to be updated with the request type and related document fields?
The mass completion page has already been updated with the required information with this enhancement for INFR 18 departments.
Thank you. Next question is, we have some reconciling items from prior year that were not remitted, but is in the system. How do we go about remitting these without duplicating the entries in discount?
You would have to create a $0 deposit to remit it to Legacy, but then you would have to do another $0 NOB to reverse that entry out in Fiscal.
Next question, when entering ORF, SAL, ADV, which request type would I use?
If this is for your CTS fund, then you would use same CTS fund transactions request type.
Next question, can we recall or cancel submit for approval before the batch process run?
No, you can't recall after submitting for approval.
When we need to make a correction to move funds from a CTS account into a state fund, would this be an NOB or not?
No, that is not considered an NOB. If you wanted to remit to the legacy system.
How do we post multiple transactions for a single check? For example, tax and expenditure.
You would have to do multiple payment sequences within a deposit.
What do we do when we have split codings for a transaction? Example for a taxable document. Which type do we use? Note that one is expenditure and the other is tax.
So you would have to do two payment sequences if you have different accounts for each payments for each request type.
Okay, in mass completion, it doesn't allow us to enter the legal authority, so we still have to manually enter this field. Will it be available soon?
We are working on a fix for the mass completion page, and if it should be pre-populated as mentioned in the matrix, then it will also be pre-populated if you're using the mass completion page. And this fix should be migrated by the end of this week.
If the payment needs to go to SCO for approval, what is the average time that it takes SCO to approve?
That depends on the transaction, and that is up to SCO's discretion.
On $0 deposits that are not NOB, can we enter any document, for example, deposit ID, or should it be the deposit ID available in the lookup only?
If it's for NOB transactions, departments are not required to enter any document information, but that field is open to you to enter information for your own use.
How do you report a credit card fee?
Depending on the account that you're entering, you would have to refer to the matrix to find the correct request type to use.
Can a deposit that was auto-populated still be denied?
I'm not sure what auto-populated, what information is auto-populated.
I'm trying to submit a $0 NOB correction and I'm getting this error message for remittance transaction. At least one payment must have distribution line with CTS fund code.
So again, this is the same question as earlier that if the bank account entered on the deposit control is a CTS bank account, then one of your payment sequences within your deposit needs to be to the CTS fund.
Why does the NOB correction need to have a CTS fund code? What if we are doing correction that was applied to worksheet and reversing it from revenue account and applying it to correct invoice in worksheet?
So if you're correcting something that has already been remitted to the state fund, then your bank account should be warrant bank account 0000.
What do I need to put in the type of transaction or just leave it blank?
That is not a required field. So with this enhancement, that information is under your request type. So you can leave that field blank.
On job aid 391A, there is remittance of an offset. Can you please explain what that is?
Those are for your TC46 transactions, and you can refer to the job aid for a screenshot of the create accounting entries.
We have a question asking if these event slides will be available later. These slides should be on ServiceNow, and they're also shared with you in your calendar invite. They're also in the page where you logged into for this WebEx. Next question is, when is AR18 going to be updated with the request type and related document fields?
As mentioned earlier, this information has already been updated for AR18 departments.
Where is the matrix for each request type?
So for remittances, there is a matrix for remittance in Job Aid 391A. And then the matrix for corrections is in Job Aid 391B. So in Job Aid 391A, the matrix is starts on page 7. So for corrections in Job Aid 391B, the matrix is on page 4.
Next question is, can we do one $0 deposit from a CTS to remit to multiple payment IDs and request types? For example, to revenue and unclear collection without creating two separate $0 deposits.
Yes, as long as you have multiple payment sequences for each request type.
When a $0 deposit is needed for a deposit with multiple payment sequences, will we need to create a $0 deposit for each sequence?
No, in a $0 deposit, you can have multiple payment sequences if it's for remittances. But for corrections, you can only have 2 payment sequences.
In some cases, we are asked to enter year, but fiscal year and calendar year may not be the same. For example, if the fire took place in June 12th, the fiscal year is 11, but calendar year is 12. Which do we choose when we enter the year?
You should always be entering the fiscal year.
Is there a matrix for same CTS fund transactions?
It is on the matrix in Job Aid 391A.
What request type should be selected when dealing with travel advances? What about salary advances?
So I believe those are for the your CTS fund, and you should be using same CTS fund transactions request type.
We'll be online for about 4 more minutes. If you have any last minute questions, please send them in. We believe we've answered all of the questions so far. So if you have any extra questions, feel free to send them in now. What request type for travel advance repayment?
So again, if this is for your CTS fund, then you would use same CTS fund transactions request type.
ON account item will no longer exist.
It doesn't exist for over remittances or AR remittances.
We'll be taking last call for questions now before we go offline. There's a question about which request type to select for calculator and warrants.
That is also, you will also use the same CTS fund transactions request type.
How do we handle advance payments? For example, collections for 2020.
I would have to look into that and get back to you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for attending today. We are now going to close this town hall. If your department is part of the Group 1 bond cash transfer, then you may stay on the line. Otherwise, that information is not going to be relevant. But we are going to close down the town hall for now. All right. Yeah, so that correction to what I just said, this town hall is now going to be closed. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And if you have any questions, please contact Fiscal Service Center at fiscal.ca.gov. Thank you.